Okay, guys, so we are starting week 4. We'll start with, today we'll start playing with multiple activities. To do that, I will create a new project. Week 4. I want to start with empty project, so we go step by step, well, with one activity, right? We'll go step by step, add more, and we'll see how we can work with them. I start with the same settings that we used before, so phone and tablet API version 15. And I select empty activity as my template, right? So same steps that we use for last 2-3 weeks. Default main activity is fine, and finish. I will give it a few seconds to start. What we'll do, we'll start with adding 2 activities. Well, one is there already. We'll add a second activity to our project. In the first one, we'll implement the functions that are related to the life cycle. So on start, on create, on stop, on destroy, and so on. And we'll add log to those functions just to observe how they are executed, when those functions are triggered. In the second activity, in the beginning, there will be only on create and also a log added to the function. So you will see how, when we are changing activities, when this function is triggered, right? So when the previous one activity is destroyed and the other one is created, right? Before we start playing with any user interface, let's fix the problem with the style, right? So I'm going to resources, values, styles.xml. I'm adding base to the parent type. This way, in my activity main, I should see the design, right? If you don't see this, make sure that here you select design, not blueprint, not design plus blueprint. Design is what you want to have selected here, right? Let's quickly do user interface for our app today. I will need this text box that will be placed to show some outputs that are coming from other activities. I will move it to the top, so I'm removing the constraint that is on the bottom. I will make it bigger, so the width will be changed to match constraint, so it's wide, and I will change the text appearance to display to, so we can see it, right? Especially when we run it on the projector. I need to add a few buttons because I will use buttons as my way to trigger actions. And I need a button to start the second activity. That will be my activity added to the application. I will have a second button that will trigger the contacts and will allow me to pick a contact from the contact list. And the second one will open, the third one will open maps, right? So we need to add 3 buttons. Let's do that. All right, drag and drop. Let's add constraints right away. So one button. This button will be btn second. Starting the second activity in my program. I will change the label to start second. I will change the layout width to match constraints. We can add some distance to the previous control, right? So they're not clustered together. I will add another button. I'll do the same steps, right? So first I add from the top to the bottom of this button to one margin and to the second margin, right? And we can increase the space. This button will be used to open maps. So it will be btn maps. And the text that it is showing will show also maps. And again, I want it white. I like those white buttons. And the last button, same thing, has to be below this one. I want it to be attached here and here. I want it to be wide. This one will be btn contact. That's the ID. And the text that it's showing will be peak contact. And to make sure that I don't have any warnings complaining about lack of constraint in this area, I'm just clicking on this plus, and it will add constraint automatically, right? Okay, let's take a look on those warnings. It's complaining about hard-coded text. I won't worry about that right now. If you want to resolve that, what you can do, you can move those labels into the strings.xml and use reference, right? Sorry, so that's my design for the first activity. Let's add the second activity right away. So let's go to app. I'll do right click on app folder. I'll go to new, and I will select activity. And from the list of templates, again, I will select empty activity. All right. So right click on app, new, activity, empty activity. This looks a little bit different than the window that you've seen when we are creating the project. You have a few more options. The first is the name of the activity. Make sure that you follow the camel case convention. So you start, it's the name of the class, right? So start with the capital letter. The name will be second. Automatically, when you change this, and you keep this convention that it ends with activity, it changes the layout name, so it's matching. You have this checkbox here. I will leave it empty right now, but putting a check in this checkbox will make the new activity also a launcher activity. I told you in the beginning when we started talking about activities that in Android you can have multiple entry points to your program. And that's how we do it, right? We are putting this checkbox here, the backward compatibility, to make sure that we can run this code on older devices with older operating system, and everything else stays as a default, right? The package name, language, and target source. Okay, we finished that. What changed in our project? You see that it is changing the structure for a second as it's building it. When it builds, when the build is completed, it goes back to the normal view. First thing that was changed in Android Manifest XML, you have a new element. right? You have activity. I told you that each component is registered in Android manifest file. We'll be modifying this file in a second. I will show you a few things. You see that these two activities look different here. This is empty, right? The empty element. While this one has intent filter added. This is indication that the main activity is the launcher. Intent filter with the action main and category launcher. If you have more than one activity with this intent filter, each of them will be entry point to your application, right? We'll get back to Android manifest in a second. Second thing that was added is a new class, second activity. Sorry, and the third thing that you will find new in your project is activity second.xml, which is your layout file for the second activity. What I want to do right now, I want to implement those functions that I told you. The functions that are triggered important points of the life cycle of the activity. Right? One of them is always there when you add new activities on create. Let's see, using log function, when this function is triggered. So log takes two parameters. First one is tag. I'll use test as my tag. Second one is the message, and the message will be on create. One thing, when you're typing, use help of your IDE. I remind you that every week, but if you do that, things like imports are added automatically, right? So you see all the classes, all the functions, and so on. Also, a hint, this thing, tag and MSG, I'm not typing this in. You shouldn't do that either. This is a hint from the IDE telling you what is the name of the parameter. Don't type it in because it will cause an error. So that's one function. What else do we need? Our functions will have more or less the same structure, so I will be typing them pretty quickly. The next one is on start. And again, when you select functions from the list, it will generate you the code. I'll be using log. Different text, right? Different message on start. Another one will be on resume. And then three functions that are triggered when our application, when our activity actually is either paused or stopped, and it will be on pause, on stop, and on destroy. So from the top, on create, on start, on resume, on pause, on stop, and on destroy. I will add also the log D to second activity. Right, so I will go to the second activity. There's on create already there. I'll add this one line with a little bit different message, right? Second. You're with me? Okay. So I'm going back to the main activity, to the first one, because I want to implement the first on-click listener for my first button. Right, the first button. Sorry, the first button that I have is starting the second activity. Let's find view by ID, RID, PKN second. That's the ID that I set for this button to know that that's the function. It is starting the second activity. Set on click listener. And I will create a new on click listener. Notice that every time I'm typing, I select it from the list, and ID is helping me to complete the code. What do I want to do here? I want to start second activity. So I have to create an intent. New intent, and in this intent I have to tell what I want to perform, what is the action that I want to perform. Intent takes 2 parameters, at least in this version it will take 2 parameters. First one is the context. I will get the context from the button that is triggering this. Context in this case will be the activity that is holding the button, but is also starting this next activity, right? And the second parameter is the class that I want to instantiate. So second activity dot class. Then I have to call function start activity, passing the intent as a parameter. Let's test our code. Let's run it. There is some issue with the emulator. Let's try to do it again. Okay, starting. In the meantime, waiting for the emulator. Where does the log go? Where is the message printed? It is printed in the console. But console for us is wrapped in a tool called Logcat. You have it on the bar on the bottom of your Android Studio. Logcat is a really nice tool. It allows you to access different features from the device. It shows you, as you can see right now, all the logs that are coming from the device that is connected. And you can filter those logs. So I'm using a function called D to log, right? D like debug. So I can filter out things that I want to see. And I have this tag, and I can filter based on the tag. And what do we see here? We see that our application should be working. It's not visible. Now it is. Okay. It was going into the background for whatever reason. I don't know why. There was something on top. So it was created. It was on start, on resume, and then went into the background, on pause, on stop. And when we when we started it again, the on start and on resume was triggered again, right? So that's my activity running. If I press the button, start second, what happens? From the first activity, on pause is triggered, then on create from the second one, from the one that is showing on the screen, and the first activity is stopped, right? Remember the idea of the activity stack from the lecture? When we are starting new activities in our application, activities are put on stack when they're going into the background, right? So when I'm starting second activity, my main activity is put on stack. So when you press back button, you close one activity and you take the first from the stack and you present it, you restart it, right? That's what happens. And normally users in Android applications are used to the fact that they can use the back button to kind of move back in the application, right? To close activity and move to the previous one. So sometimes in your application, you may want to have a button that will finish whatever you're doing, right? And go back. Let's implement that button. So let's add in the activity second in the layout. Let's add a new button. We'll attach it to the in the middle of the screen. Then the ID will be btn back. And the text will be back. The code will be fairly simple. Let's implement it in a little bit different way. Let's make our activity to be on-click listener. We have to add on-click method. And since then this on-click is simply closing my application, there will be only one line. Finish. First, I have to assign the listener to the button, right? So find view by ID, R, ID, VTN, back, set on click listener, this. Final result is the same, just different way of assigning the on-click listener. Sometimes this is more convenient because you have direct access to all the features, all the functions from the class, right? From activity. And if you test that, building, install BTK, we can start, and we can go back. I want you to take a look or pay attention to the animation that is triggered. The activity is coming from the bottom, and there is also no back arrow on the bar, right? And sometimes activities are connected in a way that one activity is always started from another activity. You can say that one activity is a parent to another activity. This is something that you can specify in the Android manifest file. In the activity tag, you can say that it will have a metadata name. What is the tag name? I forgot the property name. I will find it in a second. Android parent. Activity. Okay. It's Android. Android dot support dot parent activity. That's the name and value. Value for this one will be the class, the activity that is the parent. Try to run your application right now and see what is the difference. Do you have this class?
Yeah, I have the file, and I didn't get the file.
I will help you in a second. Okay. Now when I press start second, oh, it didn't. The activity has this back button added to the action bar, to the top, right? So instead of adding it manually as a button, you can use that. One thing that I wanted to show you before before we move farther. You see that when I'm going back, right, the implementation of the back button is simply finish, right? I've seen in few tutorials that people were doing this. Instead of just finishing the application, they've been starting the previous activity again, right? So there was an intent, I equals new intent, right? They've been doing this, and then saying start activity I. What happens if you do that? Let's take a look. I'm starting the new one, I'm going back. Looks normal, right? Starting it again and going back and so on, playing between these two activities. And then, no, I'm used to using the back button. Annoying, right? This is wrong. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do that because when we run this code, what happens, I create the main activity again, a new instance of this activity, and I put it on stack, right? So I have several instances of the same activity. Doesn't make sense. First, the right thing to do is this, right? Using finish to close the current activity and go back. But in the configuration file, in the manifest file, sorry, you can prevent people from creating multiple instances. So what you can do, you can go into Android manifest, and you can say in the configuration of your activity, using attribute that is called launch mode, that you want to have a single instance. Right? I will do that for both the main activity and the second activity. And this is attribute of the tag activity. I move it out of the project. Now, if I run my application, I won't have this weird behavior. Start, back, back, and if I press back button, it deletes, right? Finishes. And anyways, this is incorrect implementation. Don't do that. I'm removing it from my code, so it's not misleading. I just want to show you that in some tutorials, people make that mistake, and you have really weird behavior of the application. You want to go back, just close the activity. You figured it out?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing, sometimes you want to start your activity, the second one, to receive something from the user or to receive some information from that activity. To perform something, get back with this information and continue in your current activity, right? So what they say in the documentation, you want to start activity and receive some results, right? And that will be a different way to start that activity. You can do it with some system functions like contacts. You can also do that with your own activities. So what I will do right now, I will modify my second activity so it sends a message back to the first when it's done, right? So first, I need to have an information, right? Let's call it tag, a code that will allow my activity to distinguish information that is addressed to me, right? So I will create static final int my tag will be equal to 1. I know that I will need a second one for the contact. I told you that I want to do the same thing with the system function. So I will create right away another one. Final int my contact tag. So now I will modify this code, starting the second activity. I will modify this code. I will comment out what we have right now. Regular start of the activity. I will replace this with start for results. The idea is still the same. You want to define the intent, and you want to start the activity, but using different functions. So this line will be basically the same. The intent is the same. But then we'll use different function to trigger the start. You see that there are two parameters. First one is request code. The second one is the intent, right? So my request code, my tag. The second parameter is the first parameter is the intent. The second parameter is my tag. If I start activity for results, I need to have some means to receive those results, right? And that will happen in a function. And this function is called on activity results. Three parameters that we receive: request code, that's my tag; result code, this is a way to tell me if the operation was successful, if whatever is sent as a result, or if there is any result sent; and potentially nullable data, which is another intent. I told you that intent is acting kind of like an envelope, right? Intent has two ways of wrapping the data. Let me show you that. First one, through URI, and we'll use that one when we'll talk to the contacts, because that's the content provider, and content provider is using URI. Second one, more direct, is through extras. So I can use the map that is built into the intent to retrieve or to send some information. But before we start working with the data, we need to find out if there is anything sent to us, right? So first we are checking if this message is for us. So if request code is equal to my tag. If it is equal to my tag, it means that this is message from my second activity, right? Now I have to check if result code is equal to result OK. That means that activity was successful and I have something to receive. What will that be? That will be a string with a message, right? So I will declare a string message. It will be equal to data dot get string extra, and the parameter here is the key, right? And I will use MSG as my key. What I will do with this information, I want to display this information to the user, so I will find my text view and I will set text. MSG. It's complaining, so let's do cast, and that should help. So I'm starting the second activity for results here. When it's ready, it will send me back some information. Now I have to make sure that this second activity is really sending something, right? Do you have that? Can I switch screens? Okay, so I'm going to the second activity. When it's done, so on click, I will do the following. I need an intent. If I want to create a new one, I will reuse the intent that my activity already has. I will use set. Sorry, not set, put. Put extra. First parameter is the key. Should be the same that I used in the other activity. And the second one is the actual value that I want to set under this key. Right? This art is amazing. Let's show the user that we have a sense of humor. They put extra. I add this information to the envelope. And I have to set results. Set results takes 2 parameters. First one is the code, result OK. And the second one is our intent. And we finish the activity. Now we are ready to test that part. So we can run our code. And start my activity, and click back, and I have the message. The limitation of put extra, let me show you that. The fact that you have quite limited, you're quite limited in terms of what you can put there. Most of those values that are accepted by the intent are simple types. You can work around that implementing the interface serializable. We'll talk about serializable in a second. Well, not today, but in some other class. Serializable allows you to store the information about the object as a text, and then retrieve the information from text and recreate the object, right? So that may be a way to work if you want to pass something more complex than a number or a string, right? Okay, so one thing done. We know how to start activity, and we know how to start activity for results. Okay. Now let's go back to our main activity, and let's think about using some system functions. First, something simple. I want to show maps. I have a query like an address, and I want to show maps, but I don't want to implement the map view in my application. I know that right now, basically any Android device has some application that supports maps. In most cases, it's a Google map, right? So what I want to do, I want to utilize that functionality, right? So let's implement that when we click on our PTN maps button, right? Set on click listener, new on click listener. Our implementation will be a little bit different in a sense that the way how we'll create the intent will be different. But again, we'll have the same 2 steps. First, create intent. Second, start the activity, right? So intent, new intent, 2 parameters. First one, action. Intent dot action view. Second parameter tells the system what I want to see, and that will be URI. URI dot parse, and will provide a string. This string starts with geo. Same way that when you type in the browser and you start with file, you can navigate to a specific file on your disk. Here, geo means that whatever will happen later will have or should be interpreted as a geolocation query or geolocation data. And after geo, I can use latitude and longitude, if you know exactly the number, right? Or another way, you can use 0, 0 and put a question mark, and you can write a query. And this query can be, for example, an address. 160 Kendall Avenue, Toronto. It can be a postal code, or it can be a name of a specific landmark, right? A building, whatever. They're quite flexible. We have our intent. Start activity. Get context and the intent. Why you're complaining?
Let's say you go over the stuff that we
Apparently that's only for API 16. Mike says it's for 16 and not 15. So we have to upgrade it.
Okay. The start activity and the intent. Test. Maps. Here we are. Now we can wave. Yeah, the start shouldn't be here. Start should go this one. So this one should be attached to well, right, and right. Now this one should be attached to this one. This one should be attached to this one.
Yeah, it looks so that's how it actually looks.
Oh,
I think it's nice.
No, I actually wanted to.
Oh, this is one.
No, actually, it's errors.
Oh,
So. No, it's necessary.
always should be from.
When you order, right, you're saying, I want to have below this distance from this, this, whatever, right? If you do the same thing, say, I want distance from this to this, right? Right, so that's why you have to.
Is it the same thing as changing? Even like one off.
Yes.
So every time, so I don't have to wait for it to go. So this is gonna to go. So this is not. And then this is. Yeah, more than
If you run it right now, it should be okay. But you have to fix there still is some error. What you can do, you can remove all the constraints, try to set the.
I'll do it.
Well,
Oh, this is.
Конечно, неприятно, но типа делалось бесспорно. Что
Не, сам тоже.
It's one line of code. You didn't attach the on-click listener.
Oh.
So
Maybe it's just.
Yes, that
we're missing this line. Okay, there is one more thing that I want to show you today. I want to show you how you can start activity that is a system activity. For example, contacts, and ask that activity for some results. So what we'll do, we'll implement a contact picker. Again, we'll start with the main activity. Can I switch? Because I see people typing. Okay, so I'm going to the main activity. I will add another on-click listener, right? So I will find view by ID, RID, PTN, contact, set on-click listener, new on-click listener, right? What I want to do here, I want to start contact picker, and that's based on the content provider. I know we didn't discuss content providers in details, but at the same time, I know that in Java course, you had some things like databases, and you use cursors and things like that. Working with content providers is very similar to that. The only difference is that you're working through URIs, not through SQL queries. So let's do that. We have to start intent, right? New intent. This intent will have a different action because it will have action pick. And of course, the URI will be different. This one will be content, contacts. We are saying that we want to pick something from contacts. We need to set the, the type, and this type will be phone dot content type. What this will do, it will show me only contacts with numbers. So if I have a contact that has only email, I shouldn't see that. And start activity for results, my intent, and my contact tag. I'm using different tag, I'm using different code because I want to distinguish these two actions, right? I receive different things from the second activity, and I will receive different thing from the contacts. So I have to handle it separately. As you can guess, it will be in the same place. It will be on activity results. Can I move it? Okay, so my tag is done. Else, if request code is equal to my contact tag, means that I have the number. I have the number only if the result code is equal to result OK. Now I will be working with different things. I will be working with the content provider. So first, I need to get the URI that is pointing to my data. The URI with the result. And this is coming from data.getData. With content providers, I can do more or less the same operations that I would do with the database. I can do selections, projections, some grouping, and so on. In this case, I only want to do the projection. And you define it through listing in an array the fields that you want to pull from the set, right? So I will have a string array projection equals to phone number. Now I'm ready to create a field. Yes?
Can you just explain what the URI is?
What is URI?
Yeah.
URI works like a address, URL in the browser, right? But it points to the specific item in the content provider. Did you work with web services? Right? In web services, you type in the get, right? You type the URL with ID and you pull the specific item, right? it works basically the same way here. You don't start with HTTP, you start with content / contacts, and then you provide other identifiers, right? But we don't write it from, from the top of our head. We use the query to get that, right? So activity will do it for us. So I have the information that I need to open a query, to create a query. And the query is always wrapped in a cursor. T equals to get content resolver. Content resolver is a class that allows me to translate the URI into actual data. And I will do query. Query will get the URI, projection. And you see that there are other parameters that I can have. There can be selection, selection arguments, and sorting order. All other parameters will be null in my case. Null, null, and null. To run the query, I have to move my cursor to the first element. Right now, there should be only one column, but even though I may be sure or not about that, I have to check if the column is there, right? So int column, I have to find the index of my column. So C dot get column index. I'm searching for the phone number. Now I can get the number. Number is equal to C dot get string or from this column. I will do exactly the same thing that I did with the message, right? So I will find my text view, and I will set the text, but in this case, it will be the phone number. Normally, what I would do with the phone number, I would make a call or send a message or something like that, right? To keep the example simple, I will just show it. This is the whole implementation. Let's run. Here we are. Pick the contact. Shows the system window. That tells me pick the contact. If you have the emulator newly created, you may not have any contacts on this list. If you want to add a new contact, you can click on the phone. You can switch to contacts, and you can create a new contact. And I have another contact that I can select. I encourage you to do two things. First, explore different URIs, because geo is not the only thing that you can do. There is more, and if you check the documentation for intent, you will see different URIs that you can use. Second, explore this also in terms of activities that you can run for results. Because again, contact is just an example. You have access to many other content providers that you can access this way, right? So there is lots of data in the operating system that you can query, and you can receive information using the system activities, right, and running them for results. So that's it for today. I will close this. I will stop the recording, and we'll upload the code to Blackboard, and we'll answer your questions then. Okay. So let's